Venezuela continues its preparations and campaign ahead of the July 28th presidential election. In Argentina, the University of Buenos Aires declared itself in salary emergency for professors and non-teaching staff due to a lack of agreement with the libertarian government of Javier Milei. And top leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, assured that they will stop attacking Israel if a peace agreement is reached between Tel Aviv and the Palestinian resistance. Hello and welcome to From the South. My name is Belén de los Santos, and from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba, we begin with the news. In Venezuela, the presidential candidate of the Great Patriotic Poll, Nicolás Maduro, was received by the people of Barinas State in support of his electoral campaign for the elections to be held on July 28th. With the great gathering, the inhabitants of Barinas State raised slogans reaffirming their support to the candidacy of the current Venezuelan president and condemning the unilateral U.S. sanctions. In this regard, the candidate for the Great Patriotic Poll thanked the people for their unconditional support to defeat the actions of the far right wing and imperialism against national stability. Maduro further condemned the old neoliberal model imposed in Argentina by the current president Javier Milei, who has fired almost 300,000 workers, allowed the entry of the U.S. Southern Command into the country, and resigned to sovereignty over the Malvinas Islands.
Pueblo argentino.
So the people of Argentina wanted a change, and Milei appeared, a deceiver, a fascist, a fake. Milei representing the old decrepit of the Nazi ideology. Milei representing the old decrepit of the wild capitalism. And how is the people of Argentina now? They deeply regret their votes, as there have been almost 300,000 layoffs. Is that what you want? Is that what the people of Barinas want? Milei destroyed public education, closed universities, went against science, technology, public health. Milei delivered the U.S. a part of the South Atlantic territory for installing a U.S. military base. He even recognized the Malvinas to England. Do you want a puppet to come and deliver the Essequibo to the White House?
Likewise, the presidential candidate of the Great Patriotic Poll, Nicolás Maduro, condemned the intentions of the Venezuelan far-right wing to hire Colombian paramilitaries to cause turmoil in the country.
They do damage with the economic war, with the electric war. And now they have gone to hire paramilitaries in Colombia, Ojo Palau. I come from Táchira, and the people of Táchira told me, Maduro, here in Táchira, we put an end to the hired assassination, to the kidnapping. With the paramilitary, we have peace and stability. We don't want anything with those people. And Barinas also has to stand up and tell the far-right fascist wing they will never come back, neither to Barinas nor to Venezuela, nor to this homeland. They will never come back.
In this context, at the invitation of the National Electoral Council and in compliance with the Barbados Agreement of October 2023, the panel of electoral experts of the United Nations arrived in Venezuela to work during the presidential elections of July. The panel is made up of 4 specialists with extensive experience in electoral techniques and will remain in the country until a few days after the elections are over. The members of the delegation will enjoy total freedom of movement to meet with political and social actors of different denominations. These specialists are part of the more than 635 international experts that will participate in this election. We go now to Caracas, specifically to the Petare neighborhood, where our special envoy Yunus Soner has the latest in this presidential campaign. Let's see.
Hello from Caracas, from the neighborhood of Petare. We find ourselves right now in the Cristo Square, which is the center of Petare. Take a look. This is the center of Petare. Petare is a famous neighborhood It is the second biggest favela in all Latin America. It's supposed to have more than 500,000 inhabitants. The electoral campaign has already started. We see in the background a poster of President Maduro. It says President Maduro loves the people, and this is actually mounted upon a truck, and this truck takes rounds in the center of Petare. And here on the right we see a so-called electoral fair. This is a stand which educates citizens how the voting process on July 28 happens. It starts with presenting the ID and giving the fingerprint here on this machine. Then once notified by the responsible, behind this cage is the voting machine. This vote is electronic vote. So on a screen, they choose the candidate of their liking, and they receive a paper receipt for that. This paper receipt goes into the cage, which is behind, and is like a kind of comprobante, they say in Spanish. It's like a receipt, and is separately collected there. And then they sign there, and the process is finished. This whole process takes, according to responsibles, approximately 25 seconds, and is part of deep preparations, profound preparations for the elections. Remember that the government has already also organized a simulation of the voting process on June 30th, with thousands of citizens already casting their votes, not officially, legally, just to test the system. This simulation was to test also the connections between the machines, the voting machines, and the voting centers, and the counting procedure as well. The voting machines are being checked by representatives of all political parties and candidates thoroughly, and until now all things seem to be very safe and working fine. So there will be on July 28, there will be 30,000 voting machines all over the country, and 15,000 voting centers where citizens will be able to cast their votes. Foreign Minister Ivan Gil yesterday, on Wednesday, held a meeting with the representatives of the diplomatic staff, foreign countries' diplomatic staff here in Caracas, and he announced that 625 watchers, international watchers, will be present here in Caracas and the rest of the country during the elections, some of them already arriving these days. So this is a kind of citizens' education, and it's worth underlining this is not a special one, not a unique one. There are 81 such stands all over Caracas, and in all of Venezuela there are almost 1,000 such stands, 976 to be exact, according to the numbers provided by the National Electoral Council, which are educating citizens how to cast their votes. And responsibles told us that there is a huge interest, that people are coming all day long to know, to get familiar with the process of voting, casting their votes on July 28, the presidential elections. This is, for the time being, the situation in Caracas. All is easy, all is smooth, and the preparations for the elections are going forward.
And in other news, the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC, reported this month that Venezuela recorded the highest average crude oil production in June. In this sense, the OPEC reported that the national oil production of Venezuela grew 4.62% in just one quarter from April through June. The feat evidences the remarkable recovery of the industry that registers today a daily production of 922,000 barrels, despite an industrial income of $0, influenced in no small part by the impact of the illegal U.S. sanctions imposed on the nation. Regardless, the achievement puts Venezuela, the country with the largest proven crude oil reserves in the world, once again at the same levels as other strong members of the OPEC. And on Wednesday, the Bolivian Judiciary ordered the house arrest of retired Army General Jose Agreda, accused by the prosecutor's office of being part of the organization of the failed coup d'etat attempt against Luis Arce's government on June 26th. The military officer was arrested last Monday after voluntarily testifying at the Special Force Against Crime, as he already had an arrest warrant against him. According to the investigation of the prosecutor's office, the retired military officer was part of the group of retired military officers that helped the leader of the attempted coup, Juan José Zúñiga, in part of the planning. The Arce government affirmed that the defendant was the one who drafted the speech that Zúñiga was going to give if he succeeded in obtaining power. Now let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back from the South. In Argentina, the Higher Council of the University of Buenos Aires declared a salary emergency for professors and non-teaching staff due to a lack of agreement with the libertarian government of Javier Milei. The governing body of one of the most important higher education institutions in the country, which is made up of the rector, deans, professors, and students, backed the salary claim of workers and professors in view of the 40% loss in the purchasing power of salaries during the first semester of the year. The council expressed its concern for the hierarchy of the activity, including the fair remuneration for the work performed. Since President Milei took office, the universities have been in conflict over the budget and cuts in higher education spending. And in Brazil, the proposed amendment to the constitution that decrees the temporary framework for the demarcation of native communities' lands was suspended in the context of the Brazilian Senate's Constitution and Justice Committee. As expressed in the proposed amendment, demarcation can only be carried out in regions already occupied by tribal communities since October 1988, when the federal constitution was enacted. The Commission's decision came after the Federal Supreme Court established the first meeting of a conciliation commission focused on the demarcation of Aboriginal village lands, a meeting planned for August 5th, which would be supported by the native communities that would request the removal of this issue from the Senate's agenda. And the Permanent Criminal Chamber of the Supreme Court of Peru denied on Wednesday the legal appeal for the protection of rights filed by the former president Pedro Castillo, requesting the exclusion of the police intervention records derived from his arrest on December 2022. However, the Supreme Court argued in its ruling that there are no reasonable grounds to understand that on the occasion of the police intervention and the first proceedings carried out, there was material vulnerability or a serious violation of the normal course of the proceedings. Former President Castillo was under investigation for several allegations of corruption and was facing an impeachment process in Congress when he announced that he was closing the parliament and installing an emergency government. On Wednesday, in El Salvador, the non-governmental organization Cristosal presented a report revealing that 261 people, 4 of them minors, have died in local prisons in the middle of the exception regime in the country. In this sense, the report, entitled "Silence is Not an Option," collects information from family members and primary sources between March 2022 and April of 2024 as part of the President Nayib Bukele's policy of persecution, which, according to its supporters, is aimed at reducing the levels of violence in the country. The investigations, based on forensic reports, indicate that 88 of the deaths may have been the result of a criminal act.
They have died in Salvadoran jails and dungeons due to torture, cruel, inhuman and degrading treatment, lack of food, unhealthy conditions, lack of medical attention, among other situations. But there is a deliberate policy not to protect people deprived of their freedom, and we already know the speeches of government officials who call for and sow hatred against these people. This is also one of the most painful impacts because they are not known. Hundreds of children are unprotected and abandoned. More than 80,000 people have been arrested, and most of them have children. Who takes care of the children?
We have a final short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience, you can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and also share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with teleSUR. Final short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. On Thursday, the top leader of the Lebanese resistance movement Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, assured that they will stop attacking Israel if a peace agreement is reached between Tel Aviv and the Palestinian resistance. Nasrallah's statement was made during a tribute to former Hezbollah commander Muhammad Nasser Abu Nima, who was assassinated by Israel. In this context, he reiterated that the resistance movement has prepared for the worst scenarios, but they want to give the ceasefire a chance, although he clarified that if the Zionist state attacks Lebanon during this period, they will respond forcefully. Nasrallah also reminded the Ministry of Defense of the Tel Aviv regime that their army has not been able to advance in Rafah, which is a small area, indicating that Israel's threats to invade Lebanon seem unfounded. Meanwhile, in Palestine, families continue to be displaced from the city and the north of Gaza due to the constant bombardment of the territory by the Israeli army. The armed forces of the Tel Aviv regime have been dropping leaflets in the last few days, urging Palestinians to evacuate to cities located in the south of the Gaza Strip. In this context, Palestinians have denounced the scarce provision of basic supplies since the onset of the armed conflict, and demanded that Israeli troops end the oppression and violence in the Gaza Strip that is affecting Gazan children and youth the most.
We went to the Sabra area, and they bombed the house on top of us and pulled us out from under the rubble. We were there for a long time, and my husband was injured and had a fractured pelvis. He was wounded for a long time, and we had to move from one side to the other until we reached the south. God willing, this war will end. Everyone will settle in one place and have a place to stay. No more humiliation, no more oppression. I have no one with me, no family, no nothing. I have endured everything on my own, and no one can endure more.
Flyers and told us to evacuate to the south and that the road would be safe and that there would be no inspection. After this we left, thank God, from Gaza to the south, and that's what happened. There the situation was difficult with fire belts, shelling and evacuations from one place to another, and I was wounded and my children were martyred. I was only able to bring some of my things and my clothes.
Now we move on to other topics. On Thursday, Russian Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs Sergei Ryabkov assured that the NATO summit being held in the U.S. exposed the complicity of the military bloc with Ukraine. In this regard, Russian Foreign Affairs Vice Minister stressed that in the face of the strategies of Kiev and the 32 NATO leaders who intend to undermine the security of his country, there will be a military response from Moscow. On the other hand, Ryabkov also indicated that Russia approaches this issue without nerves and without emotions, according to his words, giving priority to a military response. It is worth noting that Germany and the U.S. announced that they will deploy long-range strike systems on German territory by 2026, including hypersonic weapons. And interim NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg reiterated that the military bloc's position to stay aimed at Ukraine's NATO membership, while also stating that relations between China and Russia are a threat to the West.
We also decided to take further steps to bring Ukraine even closer to NATO. As Ukraine continues its vital reforms, we will continue to support them on their irreversible path to NATO membership. The work we are doing together now will ensure that when the time is right, Ukraine can join without delay. It is not a question of if, but when. China has become a decisive enabler of Russia's war against Ukraine. And China's support increases the threat Russia poses to Euro-Atlantic security. Allies have stated clearly that China cannot enable the largest conflict in Europe in recent history without this negatively impacting their interest and reputation.
In this context, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Ling Yang called on NATO leaders to listen to the international community and take action to ease the ongoing tensions.
We urge NATO to reflect on the root causes of the crisis and its own actions, listen carefully to the just voice of the international community, and take concrete actions to ease the situation, instead of shifting the blame to others.
We go now to sports as Colombia defeated Uruguay 1-0 in their Copa America semifinal on Wednesday, despite being reduced to 10 men before halftime in a game that ended with ugly scenes as players entered the crowd to confront fans. Jefferson Lerma's header got his team the victory. The three-colored team will be Argentina's opponent in the championship's final on Sunday at the Hard Rock Stadium in Miami, and it will try to win its second Copa America in history after they won it as hosts in 2001, while the Albiceleste team could become the tournament's top winner by surpassing Uruguay since they are both equal at 15 victories. One day earlier, at the same time, Uruguay will face Canada in the match that will define the third and fourth place of the competition. And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and also on TikTok. For TeleSUR English, my name is Belén de los Santos. Thank you for watching.